Okay, so let's talk about Sick, Survive the Night. Obviously a zombie movie, and let me tell you, by the end of this movie you'll be going, just like the zombies in this movie. So this is a low budget horror flick, and obviously influenced by the likes of The Walking Dead, and it takes place sometime after the kind of the zombie apocalypse, and basically there's kind of pockets of unaffected humans that are kind of, you know, dotted around the kind of the globe, and it focuses on a kind of a few different characters. I guess there's kind of three main characters, one of which is this kind of female doctor / scientist who's kind of on the lookout for the cure, and she's in some kind of sort of government building where to try and find out the cure and, you know, try and sort of fight this kind of this zombie outbreak through science. And it also focuses on a couple of other blokes, basically, a couple of guys who sort of happen to sort of get caught out in this kind of zombie nest, and these are basically some kind of camp. And then we're told there's other types of survivors as well. They call vultures, which are more sort of cannibalistic and kind of on the wild side. And ultimately, the story here is these three end up sort of together and they sort of hold up in this house after the kind of, you know, a wave of zombies, basically. And that's it. There's really not a lot of plot here, to be honest with you. The central premise here is stretched out so thin because there's no actual real story here. I guess this is what this movie is trying to do, is trying to look at the more human condition behind, you know, with the zombie apocalypse kind of being in the background. And when you're kind of a low budget movie like this, I guess to try and sort of stretch out the budget and kind of, obviously they can't afford to do loads of effects and things like that. I've seen this a couple of times where they're trying to look at the human element. But let me tell you, when you're watching a zombie film, you're not watching it for the human element. You're watching it for zombie attacks and things like that. And I've seen a couple of these films now that just sort of try this formula, and it works in some respects in things like The Walking Dead because you have time to kind of flesh out the characters and things like that. But in a kind of a 90-minute low-budget movie, unfortunately, it just comes across as rather boring because you're not invested in the characters. And speaking of the characters, this is one of the main issues I have with this film as well, is the characters' motivations are so unclear here, and they just seem to change their complete personality and motivation at seemingly a drop of a hat multiple times through this film. So it's really sort of disconcerting because you're really unclear about who you should be kind of rooting for, because at one point certain people will seem like they're the kind of, I guess, the protagonist, then all of a sudden it will be kind of someone else. So there's no real clear kind of, I guess, good guy in a certain degree. They also introduce a lot of kind of peripheral characters. I think they kind of have them sort of killed off fairly quickly, which has kind of seemed, you know, a bit of a waste. As far as the zombie attacks to go themselves, the zombie makeup isn't bad. And I have to say, I quite like some of the set design here. The house that they hold up on basically has got kind of lots of, you know, bloody handprints all over it and things like that. So it kind of, the aesthetics of some of the sets and some of the zombies aren't too bad. Not quite as graphic as they were made to believe on the cover here, but nevertheless, it's not too bad. I think some of the zombie makeup looks okay, but nothing outstanding. But to be honest with you, the zombie attacks are fairly infrequent, so they're not actually on screen a whole lot. They seem to be kind of congregating around the house, and it does have a couple of ideas here and there that are kind of, I guess, sort of new to this sort of film. For example, there's one of the sort of scientists basically has a kind of way to try and disguise herself, you know, from the zombies, which I haven't kind of seen before. So, you know, maybe so it has a kind of a couple of inventive ideas. But the main problem here is first of all the lack of story, because there's very little here. It's such a kind of a slight plot. You're just kind of waiting for the kind of the story to progress, and they just seemed. I mean, 2/3 of this film, it seems, is just holed up in this house, and the kind of the interaction between sort of these three characters, and they're not all that interesting. And like I say, they're very hard to kind of to get really behind, because they just seem so ill-defined about who their actual characters are. And then we see some of the scenes involving kind of secondary characters, and I have to say the secondary characters in particular are pretty bad in regards to their acting abilities. The main three aren't as bad, but the kind of the peripheral secondary characters, the acting is quite poor, especially from I guess one of the sort of the female co-stars as well, which is I think, to be quite honest, she's only in the movie because she's got quite big boobs, and they kind of want to put her in this kind of little skimpy t-shirt, but you know, so. I have to be honest with you. I found this movie quite boring, even though it has a couple of artistic things I kind of liked about it as a film itself. And this is coming from someone who enjoys zombie films and even enjoys some crappy B movie, even Asylum zombie films. But this one was boring, and despite the fact that some of the zombie makeup wasn't too bad, the story just wasn't engaging. Not one engaging character in this movie, and quite to be honest with you, at the end of this movie, I look like a zombie myself. So I'm going to give this movie a 2.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.